So welcome to our Share and Torah Anytime. We are up to Perek Chaf Aleph. So the next few Perakim seems to be like almost like like additions to the stories of what we learned until now. It's like Chazal say, Ein Mugdem U'Me'ocher B'Torah. That means you don't know always the chronological events based on the order of the Perakim. And this Perek seems like an event which happened earlier on in the story, or much earlier on in the reign of David HaMelech, and that just answers a lot of questions that are going to come up. So, Vayhi Ra'ov, we made David Shalosh Shana. Shana Achri Shana. It was 3 years that there was a famine. It seems like it was right after David HaMelech took over the kingdom. There was a 3-year famine. Vayivakesh David es Penei Hashem. It seems like David HaMelech turned to the Urim v'Tumim, and he wanted to know what's the reason for this famine. Now you have to understand, in ancient times, when there was a famine, there were no Red Cross emergency packages. When there was a famine, then people died, literally.
Was it Shana after Shana?
Year after year, meaning 3 years in a row. 3 years in a row, and that was like a huge calamity. When you have a 3-year famine, one after another, you can't even stock food anymore, you can't recover, there's no food in the storehouses, people are dying from hunger. Vayivakesh David es Penei Hashem, vayomer Hashem al Shaul ve'al Beis Hadomim al asher heimis es hagavonim. The Urim v'Tumim let David HaMelech know that the reason for this famine is because it's for Shaul and his house of blood for killing the Gevonim. Now, what's the story with these Gevonim? The story of the Gevonim was that in Yeshua Perek Tes, it tells you the story how the Gevonim fooled the Jewish people. Now, what happened was, they were really neighbors. So when the Jews came and they took over the land of Canaan, they were afraid that they were going to be killed. Now, if they would or they wouldn't, we don't know. But they came and they would dress themselves up as if they were travelers who were coming from a very long distance, from a very far away place, all shabby. And they came to Yeshua and they said that they want to become Gedim. They want to join, they want to convert, and they want to work for the Jewish people. They want to work for the Israelites. And they agreed. And they made a shvur with them, they made a pact that they wouldn't backstab him, and that they would agree. Now later on they found out that it was a scam. That really they were Gevonim who were neighbors. They were a neighboring country. And they only did it in order to save themselves from getting killed. But they had no real intention of joining the Jewish people or adopting who they were. But still, the decision was that they were going to keep their promise, being that promises were made, they're going to keep their promise and they're not going to kill them. And they were called the Gevonim. Now, we don't find anywhere that Shaul actually physically went and he killed out the Gevonim. It didn't say it in all of Shmuel Aleph or up to Shmuel Beis. All it does say, and that's how Chazal explained it, was that the Gevonim lived and worked in Noiv Ira Kohanim. Now Shmuel killed Noiv Ira Kohanim when he suspected that they were harboring David HaMelech and that they took care of him, like we learned in the Navi. So what happened was that because Noiv Ira Kohanim was killed out, therefore all the Gevonim ended up penniless. They ended up destitute. They ended up without any work. That's one pshat. The other pshat is that they were actually killed together by Noiv Ira Kohanim. But regardless, whatever it was, they kept the grudge and they kept the score that Shaul did them wrong. So being that the chet came from Shaul against the Gevonim, that's why there's a rav, that's why there's a drought, a famine. Yikra Melech leGevonim, vayomer aleim, David HaMelech calls the Gevonim. Now here the pasuk says, "V'hagevonim lo b'nei Yisrael hemu." The Gevonim are not real Jews. Ki miyeser ho'amori, they were from like a tribe of them, from the Amorim of Bnei Yisrael nishbu lehem, and the Jews swore to them in the time of Yeshua that they wouldn't kill him. And even though they fooled Yeshua, but they still kept their shvua. So they used to take care of the avodas hamikdash. Ve'yavakei Shaul la'koisam b'kanoisei livnei Yisrael v'Yehuda. And Shaul wanted to hit them or kill them. B'kanoisei livnei Yisrael v'Yehuda. Vayomer David al hagivonim mo asa lachem. How would you like restitution? V'ma chaped. How can we clean up the sin? There's an old score. We need closure here. In order that Hashem should forgive us and that He should send back the blessings and that the rain should fall again. We don't need kesef. We don't need zahav. We don't need any money restitution. We have nothing against any of the Israelites. None of them. We have nothing against them. There's nobody who we want to take revenge on. So the Melech said, "Vayomer, if you still feel that you were wronged, tell me what you want should be done, and I'll do it." This is a real horrible pedic. I was struggling with this for like a few days. I couldn't make heads and tails out of the story here. The person who caused us, who wronged us, who either killed us or caused us to become destitute. The ones who wanted to eradicate us, he's gone. Only his progeny, only his Einik are still alive. Therefore, Yutan Lanu Shiva Anoshim Ibanav. Give us 7 of his children, or 7 of his descendants. And we're going to crucify them or impale them. Bottom line is we're going to kill them and we're going to hang up their bodies. But give Ashol Bechir Hashem. In give Ashol, that's going to be the revenge. Now Chazal say that this is one of the proofs that the Gevornim were not real Jews, because one of the Tchunas HaNefesh of a Jew is to be Rachmanim, Baishanim, Goim Lechasadim, and a Jew would never do such a thing. Like there's a story. I mamish was like I couldn't process this whole story. So like there's even a story, like the very famous story that Klozim Megadov after the war. Now Klozim Megadov I think lost, I remember 10 or 11 children that the Nazis Yimach Shemam killed, and after the war he had an opportunity. One of the generals captured a bunch of Nazis, and it was like up to him to give the okay, like to kill him. And he couldn't. He just couldn't give the command that they should kill the Nazis, and they were Nazis, Yimach Shemam, who killed his entire family. Because at the end game, Yidna Rachmanim, it's just built in that the Tchunas HaNefesh of a Yid is that he has compassion and he has mercy. So the king said, "Look, if there's nothing else that you want, Ani Aten, I'm going to give them. I'm going to give them over." Now, again, it's all in the context of the story that he asked the Urim V'Tumim. Now, Pi Halacha, you're not allowed to do it. Pi Halacha, you're not allowed to give people to get killed for any types of cheshbon. But it seems like that from the Urim V'Tumim, it came down on it, and that, this is what has to happen. And I went into Mamash very like internally, I just couldn't make sense out of it, and this brought me up this whole concept of Gilgulim, this whole idea that there's this idea that there's reincarnations. That means there's this idea where somebody did something wrong in point A in history, and then generations later you say, "Oh, you know why this happened? It's a Gilgul," or somebody suffers.
After, not before.
After. This is after.
Right. This is before. He's saying, well, he's giving them the 7 people to be slaughtered
for a story that happened before.
Right, but you can say afterwards that these 7 people that he gave, they were really the people from them.
Right, so I'm saying,
how do you give?
Before them, how do you give, number 1. And number 2, even let's say we're going to go on this whole path of Gilgulim, which is really as a source in the Torah from the Sher'ina Liyodo in Parshas Mishpatim, where you have this idea where somebody dies because in the last Gilgul he killed somebody and there was no Edom and Asera, and then in this time he gets killed when somebody falls off the ladder. Rashi brings it. Well, you have this famous Torah from the Baal Shem Tov, And the pasuk says, if you're going to do what you're supposed to do, then it's going to be good. If you don't do it, it's not going to be good. You see that it doesn't work out that way. You have people in they're following all the chukim, and you see, why do good things happen to bad people? Why do bad things happen to good people? The question. So the Hashem Tov says, in is Rosh Tevis Avos, Aleph Beis Sof. That means you have to look back what happened Avos, what happened in previous generations, because there's the Soda Gilgulim, which answers a lot of these questions. Now, how it answers these questions and how Gilgulim, like this person, like imagine these 7 Einiklech from Sholem Melech, they did nothing wrong. It's like the whole debate that was going on now when the war broke out in Ukraine. So there was this whole debate going on. Like some people were saying the Ukrainians were the worst people who murdered Jews, cold-blooded murderers. They tortured people. They were the worst of the worst. And they said, I have no problem. I mean, let them all get wiped out. It's like what was the story with Begin? I remember when Iran was fighting against Iraq or something, and they said, what do you say about this war? He said, I wish them both luck. Like Hargitsen goes. I mean, what's my game? The Russians were bad for the Russians. Stalin was bad for the Jews, and Ukraine was bad for the Jews. But on the other hand, you look at it and you say, I don't know, these people growing up in Ukraine today, could be their grandparents or their great-grandparents were evil murderers, but what does that have to do with them? But then you have the same question also, where you have, let's say, the Ben Seder murder, you had David HaMelech, he's crying, B'ni Avshalom B'ni. And it seems like Avshalom, the reason why Avshalom got killed and why this whole story that happened with Amnon and Tamar was all a result of Nasan Hanavi telling him that this is going to happen because of the story of Bathsheba and Uri Achiti. So then the same question comes up, like, what is Avshalom guilty that you messed up?
Also, he married the Eshes Yifas Torah.
Plus the Eshes Yifas Torah. So you say, look, so the Torah says that if somebody marries the Eshes Yifas Torah, so then he's going to have a child. Rashi says, Lama Nismchu, why is it close one parsha to Eshes Yifas Torah to the Ben Seder murder? It says if you're going to do that, you're going to end up with this. But then this kid who was born from your relations with the Eshes Yifas Torah, what did he do wrong? So you're saying he's born with bad tchunas and nefesh. I mean, it's not his fault. He was born that way. And then you end up killing him. And that's what happened by Avshalom, where he gets killed. We spoke about it, that the B'ni Avshalom B'ni was that he took responsibility, and the Melech said, I wish I would have died instead of you, because he said it's coming because of me. Now that's beautiful that someone's taking responsibility on his own thing, but the fact is that Avshalom, or the Ben Seder murdered, or here in this case, the Einiklech of Shaul, that because Shaul did something wrong, and on the other hand, we know that Chazal say, "Lo yimsu banum al avos v'avos al banum," right? That you don't get killed. Hashem doesn't take accountability banum al avos, but then there's other places where it seems to say that there is responsibility that if you're going to do things wrong, it's going to cause calamity coming upon your children.
What's Ma'aseh Avos Siman L'banim?
Ma'aseh Avos Siman L'banim? No, yeah, that's just like how we should be acting. That if we see that the Avos did a certain thing, it's a siman, but L'yimsu banum al avos v'avos al banum means that we're not going to get punished, that the next generations or that parents don't get punished for their children. And it's the same thing today. It's like you have people do things wrong and then you blast their parents and you say, I don't know, because everybody has bechira, everybody has free choice, and if their child decided to go do something which is immoral or wrong, why are you penalizing their parents for that? And I don't have a good answer on this question. I'm just learning the Pedic the way it says. The thing about Gilgulim, which I found fascinating, is that Lahavdil, it's not only a Jewish concept. This whole idea of reincarnation and of karma and of, coming down again and again and having to repeat life scenarios in order to rectify old things, tikkunim, etc., is something which exists in many cultures, and the Buddhists have it, the Hindus, it's in many different cultures this idea exists. So it's not Lahavdil, it's not only a Jewish idea. And it seems like in the B'riya there is such a concept that many times we go through stuff in our lives and we say it's not fair, and you have to know that this is not the first time you've been around town, and there's things that you've done on other times, and then the question is also, even in this story, why is this happening so many years later? I mean, Shaul committed this story many, many years earlier. And here you have the story of this Einiklech, and it's happening 3 years after a famine. I
But
don't know
God
the
is the
pshat.
one. In all these instances, God is the one that takes the revenge, not humans. So to say we're going to punish him because of his grandparents, we don't do that. We're not handing him over 7 because of the grandparents. We let God do it, and then afterwards we'll say, yeah, that was the reason, that's what we're going to say.
Right, like Yosef
But
and
to give over, you're going to be the one that's carrying it out? What is that?
Right.
Yosef and the Shvatim and the Sarah Gemal.
Right, and you have the Surah Gemalchus also, like generations later,
Yeah,
are paying back sin from the past.
Right, but now we could see they came. The 10 brothers came down as Sarah Gemalchus. Afterwards, you could look back and say they probably volunteered to come back down to be Masakinet or whatever, and now they went. But you can say after. We don't say, okay, you're going to be Masakin, you're Gilgal, let's go kill you.
So the question is, like the Urim V'Tumim told him that he should give them over, which he did. But then the question is, no, it says that he asked Hashem, what's the cause for it? And he told him that this is the sin that has to get fixed. He said that it said here in the pasuk that he reached out. Vayivakesh David es Pnei Hashem. So the questions are better than the answers. It's just not that it answers any of the questions, just gives you a little perspective. B'chlal in life, something that you always have to wonder. It's like the same question that I always had. Like when we talk about mamzerim, lo yavoi mamzer b'kahal Hashem. And you say, I don't understand, what is this holy mamzer at fault that his parents did A, B, C, D, E, F, G? His parents are... I don't know the answer to that. However, because of this, because we find so many times that there is consequences, that's the reason why people think twice before they do something. That means when you in your life want to take revenge, let's say on the Gevonim, whoever your Gevonim are, and you learn this Perek Enach, and you know that the story says that nothing goes unpunished. Don't think that there's an end to the story continues on. It's almost as if that, like, if there's a neshama or there's a soul who does something, and you see in his entire lifetime, his 80 years that he was here, nothing happened. Then he like comes back up to heaven, and the same neshama, they tell him, I want you to know that because you did A, you're going to come back down as B, but you're not going to know. You're not going to know. Maybe if you'll hang out with the Baal Shem Tov, he'll reveal to you that it's the same consciousness. It's, there's a place where there's a consciousness somewhere above that knows what was done here and knows how it's playing out here, and also knows the pain that's going through the human consciousness, or this neshama that's having here and doesn't know why it's happening. And then somewhere from above, that is the consequence that we're telling you. Nothing goes, there's din v'cheshbon, and there's an end to every single story, and it could take generations, and therefore, think twice before you do moves over here. I don't know.
Why would David agree to this?
No, he's saying.
I don't think it's about David agreeing. I think it's about he was mevakesh es Pnei Hashem, and I think that was the message. But the question is, why does Hashem do things that way? And the answer is, I don't know. I don't know why anything is.
Saw this in the Tumim, I think
he asks. He's mevakesh.
Why? What? And they said that this is because of that. But
Vayivakesh David Pnei Hashem. So
afterwards, it says that he went. And
presumably, I guess that's what the message from the Urim V'Tumim was. But again, it's not giving you a lot of details. It's just telling you, I'm going to give it. Really, there is a theme to this Perek which is very powerful and very meaningful. You will see. Vayachmon HaMelech al Mephibosheth ben Yonasan ben Shaul al Shavuas Hashem asher ben Noison ben David ben Yonasan ben Shaul. Now, we do know that David HaMelech made his own pact with Yonasan that he would be loyal to him. So we knew that he had his son a cripple, Mephibosheth, which we already had a few times that we bumped into Mephibosheth. And because David HaMelech had his agreement with Yonasan of his friendship, he spared the crippled son of Yonasan, Mephibosheth, that nothing should happen to him. So he took the 2 children of Ritzpah bas Aya, which was Shaul's Pilegesh, as Hermoni v'es Mephibosheth, a second Mephibosheth, v'es Chameshes b'nei Michal bas Shaul, asher yoldo l'Adriel ben Barzilai ham-Choilasi, and 5 sons of Michal bas Shaul. Now this is very problematic because Michal bas Shaul, we know, was David HaMelech's wife, and she didn't have any children. That the pasuk said beferish that he never lived with her whatever, that he didn't have any children from her, and maybe according to one that she died in childbirth from having a child. So the Mefarshim say it doesn't mean Michal Bashol. She had a sister Meirav, and Meirav, if you look back in the Pesukim, married Adriel ben Barzilai. So it seems that Meirav's children were raised by Michal Bashol, which again is extremely bothersome. That means Michal Bashol is David HaMelech's wife, and she's raising her nephews, which is Meirav's children, and he's giving over these 7 children to get killed by the Givonim. Vayitnam b'yad ha-Givonim v'yakiyim b'har l'fnei Hashem, and they killed them b'har l'fnei Hashem v'yiplu shevatam. All 7 died together, yochad, at once. They were killed in the beginning of the spring, when the wheat is cut. Now, first of all, just to get the pattern over here, you have one story of a pact being made with the Gevonim, between Yeshua with the Gevonim, and even though the Gevonim fooled Yeshua, and even though they were cruel people, still the pact was kept. And when the pact was broken by Shaul, still God is like demanding restitution. That hey, you made a pact with the Gevonim, you can't break a pact, even if you find out later that the guy is cruel and that he screwed you, but you made a shvua. And the second thing is that David is keeping his pact. That means he's trying to fix up Shaul's breaking of a pact, and he's keeping his own agreement that he made with Yonasan to protect Mephibosheth. And now they were killed. Now comes the greatest tragedy of the whole story. Ritzpa bas Aya, who's the mother of 2 of these children, who was the Pelegesh from Shaul, takes a cloth and she covers over Lo El Atur, on the stone where they were killed. Metchilas ktsir, metchilas kotzir ad nitach mayim aleim en hashamayim. From the beginning of the spring, when they used to cut the wheat, until it started to rain, which means until Sukkot time, like a period of 7 months. She stood there, she camped out there, she lived there, and she wouldn't let any animals or any birds desecrate the bodies of these seven Mason. So it's like a tragedy beyond. You have her mourning her children, and she just camps out over there. And David HaMelech heard what Aya, Peleg Shaul, was doing, that she was guarding these bodies. Vayelech David vayikach es atzmes Shaul es atzmes Yonasan b'noi me'ez Bali. Yovesh Gilad asher gomvu oisem merchoiv beishan asher tlom shama pelishtim yem hakois pelishtim Shaul b'Gilboya. Now, if you remember earlier in the story, we read about this, how Shaul and Yonasan's bodies were desecrated by the Pelishtim, and how the people from Yovesh Gilad buried their bodies properly. Here you have like the end of the story, where after this, David HaMelech realized the disgrace that's going on because of Ritzpa, and he went and he took back all of the Atzmos, Yonasan, Benoy, and all of these 7 bodies, and he brought them back, and he was like going to honor the memory of Shaul. Vayal Misham from Yovesh Gilad, that's Atzmos Shaul, that's Atzmos Yonasan Benoy, Vayas was Atzmos Hamukoyim, plus these 7 Eniklich, 7 grandchildren. Yigbiru as Atzmos Shaul, Yonasan Benoy, Be'eretz Binyama B'Tzela, Be'kever Kish Ovav. Vayas Kolash Tziva HaMelech. And they did whatever the king commanded. What David HaMelech said they should do to bury Shaul and Yonasan with honors. Hesped, Vayei Aser Elikim La'aretz Achrikein, and God bestowed the land with blessing, and it began to rain. That's the story. Mamash couldn't make heads and tails out of the story. And to be very honest, when I read the story, I said, oh, okay, so that's why they don't learn Nach. So that's why they don't learn Nach. It's not because of Basheva. No. This is it. But we still have to learn Nach, because we have to learn the stories that we can't understand, because in real life there's many stories we don't understand. There's many it's like you talk about the Holocaust, right? It's like No, we don't get it. We still don't get it, and we're still here. And it's still part of Torah that this is what happened, and this is what transpired. And we have to glean whatever messages we could from it. And v'chayit naliboy, but it's a very tragic story. So now, after we finish the story of the Gevonim and the Kvura Shol, we're going back to, if we remember that one of the original heroic acts of David HaMelech was that he killed Goliath. So now, we're talking about the brothers of Goliath. Goliath wasn't the only giant. He had brothers giant, and we're describing over here as almost like an appendix, or almost like an additional add-on on the original stories. Vayed David v'avodav ima v'yilachmu es Pelishtim v'yoav David, and David became very weak from battling the Pelishtim. Vayishbi b'noiv, and Yishbi lived in Noiv. Asher b'yilidei Hadafa, that was from the children of Hadafa. So Hadafa, some say, means Arpa. It's almost the same Osius, like Arpa, which was the mother. Umishkal Kenoi, and this guy was huge, and the weight of his spear was Shloish Me'as Mishkalo, was like 300 Mishkalim. Nechoshes from copper. That means he was an extremely large warrior with a huge spear. V'hu Chagur Chadasha, and he was wearing new weapons. Vayomer, like a uniform or something that carries the weapons. Vayomer lahakar, says David, and he wanted to kill David, who was, of course, he was weak, and David was weak from the battle. Vayazer lo Avishai ben Tzeruya, and Avishai ben Tzeruya came to his aid. Vayaches a Plishti ve'miseyu, he killed the Plishti, he hit him. As nishbu anshe David lo lemer. That's when the people from David made a pact to him, and they said, you won't go out anymore to battle, so that the light of Israel should not go out. Which is another pact. This is a Pedic which is describing all about making pacts and swearing and keeping your word. This is the theme of this Pedic. There was another battle. There was Sivchei, who came from the Yeshuv of Chusha. He was one of the warriors of David. Asaf asher belidei Rafa. He killed Saf, who was another brother from the children of Rafa. Ve'etz chanisoi, and the spear from this like mini Goliath. Now, even though we know that Goliath was already killed, but it seems like this was like a Goliath Junior of sorts. This was like a second Goliath. And his spear was so large, like a weaver's beam. Like he had a weaver's beam, which was something like a huge pole. This guy was a mega guy, killed him. There was a guy, his name is Ishmodon, that they came. And we don't know actually how big or strong, but we know about this one that ve'etzbois yodov ve'etzbois raglav sheish v'sheish. He had 6 fingers and 6 toes. That's some medical condition where a person can have an extra finger. So part of his giantism was that he had he had esrim v'arba mispat. He had 24, because he had 6. He had 12 and 12. V'gamhu yulad lo harafa, and he was also a child of Harafa, which we said may be Arpas, Vayicharef es Yisrael, and he also came and he antagonized the Jews, and he was Mecharef Megada V'Yakeu, Yonis ben Shimon Achi David, and Yonis ben Shimon Achi David killed him. Es Arbas Eila Yiladu LaHarafa Bagas Vayiflu B'Yadavid B'Yadavadam. So this addendum is fill-ins of what we learned before. And the main theme over here is that you're having 3 times in this Pedic this theme of pact, keeping a pact even when it doesn't work out, and David HaMelech having to fix up a broken agreement, and then keeping his agreement, and then the servants of David HaMelech making with him an agreement too. We also have a message over here of how Ritzpah sat and mourned all these and protected the dead, which caused David HaMelech to honor the memories and honor the legacy of Shaul and his children, even though David was like the opposing kingdom. And then we were left what we spoke about in the beginning of this is like the questions that come up from this Perek that we don't really know the answer.